Hey, it has been about 7 months, but I'm back. So, just to fill in the gap, um, I didn't get the grant I was proposing for. I actually proposed for two separate grants, and one of them I just outright didn't get. The second one, though, I got right down to the final two possible candidates, and I missed out at the last minute. The feedback was really useful. And I really appreciated a lot of the chats I had with the tutors involved in that process as well. It was really good, and I've got some good things to go forwards with. However, now I'm in a position where I didn't get the funding, and in the meantime, I've had to sort family life situations and financial changes have had to be made. And long story short, I'm now in a new full-time position, which is going, when it starts next month, is going to result in me not having much free time at all, or nothing compared to what I've had during the last 18 months or so anyway. So we're now looking at approaching PhD from a self-funded position so that I can take a longer time over it and be doing it alongside full-time work as well. And also it means I can kind of just pitch my own thing a little bit more flexibly, and I'm not trying to people please too much with my content ideas. Um, so as long as I can show the funding, I have the funding, which I'm pretty sure I can get through alone at the moment, if not provide it myself, then I'll be able to crack on and do whichever idea I ultimately come to. So the main reason I wanted to babble on YouTube once more and get talking about it is because it's time to reframe my proposal, reframe my idea for what I'll actually be doing. And a big part of that now is the fact that I don't have that much free time and I'm not working on a grant, so I'm not going to be on this PhD full time and able to go and do things and actually be practical about it. This idea needs to move to a much more desk-based set of research without the practical element, really, because I just don't really have the scope for that. If there's any practical element, it has to be quite minimal because I can only really give it weekends, maybe evenings as well. But at some point, I do have to think about a work-life balance. I can't just go to work all day, every day through the week, and then my home life is just PhD. I need some separation in my life to be able to juggle that a little bit. I'd like to see my wife once in a while. So the way I need to go about this now is to pull out those practical elements, but still justify what I'm researching and why it's a useful thing to be researching, to spend so much time doing. And one of the biggest challenges in that as well is, what does a data set look like in this particular topic without a practical element? So to refresh my thinking, it was to compare how media language, specifically film language, is used in new emerging moving image technologies. One criticism that my proposal had, the last proposal, was that it was a little bit too dependent on the idea of TikTok. That's my own fault in terms of how I phrased it, I think, because it was never about TikTok. It was about emerging platforms, and TikTok was used as an example of one such platform. But what I failed to do in the proposal was to give it a sense of being future-proof and to say how I can adapt a framework from this PhD and use that to study any platform that emerges during the time of research, or any platform that emerges after the research is complete, and people who have read this paper can utilize in their own analysis of these new platforms. So that is really the key way forward for me, is using that element of future-proofing and saying this is about new emerging media platforms and not about one thing like TikTok. It's about amalgamating lots of different technologies that are available to people. Moving image would be the main one, although I am moving into a photography job at the minute, which says to me maybe there would be some use in me moving this out into a more representational field and having not moving image, but actually just image construction as a whole. But we'll get into that later, maybe not even in this video. The useful part, I think, though, is the idea of desk-based research stemming from a sheer quantity of content from cinema through YouTube, TV earlier, obviously, and then into the more social media, app-based proliferation of moving image. So Instagram stories, TikTok, um, things that came and went, Boomerang and Vine, lots of little bits and pieces, and trying to connect a through thread across those things. So taking early cinema theory, investigating, does it apply, first of all, to these new technologies? And there's a bit in McLuhan that I'll be drawing on for sure, where it gets into a discussion of whether an old media theory is appropriate to new media in a given definition of new media, which is also something that I'll have to elaborate on. And I think that will form a large part of my literature review. It's going to be talking a lot about what is new media, what is meant by new moving image platforms, and what theories, if any, are applicable to these things, and is that appropriate to do, or do they actually call for a completely new set of theories? Which is not the aim of this PhD. This PhD is not to provide those theories. It's not to say media like Boomerang has necessity for a particular theory which reads image in this way because it does not allow for use of it does not allow, like go right back to Eisenstein, it does not allow a basic interpretation of montage in the way that we've theorized it over the years, but in fact requires us to look at two images together in a completely new way. I don't think, just off the top of my head without reading around that, I don't think, first of all, that statement is at all true. But also, I don't think that's the job of this piece of research to say. I don't think this piece of research is creating particular theories for particular platforms. Instead, it's investigating how useful existing theories are when looking at these platforms. The big hurdle for this proposal and ultimately this thesis is to find what the output is in that. Originally, the output was in creating a couple of pieces of filmed content with the same narrative structure. So one would have been filmed traditionally using practiced film methods with a crew and with a lot of equipment and actors. And then the second would have been done through a platform like TikTok and the capabilities that has, but also in a style reminiscent of what the common user of that platform is able to do. Then there would have been an extra level after that, that would have been workshopping. It would have been taking secondary age students who've been screened and sampled through questionnaires to gain a good cross-section of students, some with media experience, some without, to then ask them to create a narrative within TikTok, or again, another platform, whichever is relevant to them at the time. A big part of that research would be asking them, which apps do you use? Do you create moving image? If so, how? Why? Then it would be getting them to use their skills that they have in those particular apps and to say, okay, go, do your thing, create this story that I've provided you with, and let's examine how you go about doing that. What approaches do you use? What is similar to how a filmmaker and a crew would do what you're doing? What is different? What language do you use? What actual words do you speak while you're constructing these images? Do you use formal media language? Do you talk about shot length and edits and transitions? Or do you say, I just need this, I need that, I need this, and you don't worry about the frame, you don't worry about the movement, you just get it on a camera? So moving away from that kind of output where I have a very clear conclusion I can draw on saying, yes, it's appropriate to talk about media language in a new moving image technology. And here is an example of young people doing just that and suggesting ways in which this is useful and applicable in a future of media content creation in terms of who we're training and how we're training them. Instead of that, this is desk-based now, and I need to be much more focused on just the theoretical side. I just need to be able to say these theories are or are not appropriate to these platforms, and here's what we can do with that information. That feels very weak to me. That doesn't feel like something that needs saying yet. So this is the area really I need to work on a lot. What is the output? What is the use of it? I can see what the research looks like. Research is just a huge volume of media content, making a lot of comparisons, analysis, talking about theories, putting a lit review at the start of it and saying, here are the things I'm going to be drawing on while I talk about those things. But ultimately, what's the point? Do I come out of this and I suggest a new model and say, if a new media technology emerges, here's how we as academics can read it. That might be a good angle, actually. The word read itself would be useful because there is a lot of historical, I wouldn't say debate, but talk around that word read when it comes to a moving image. Famously, Bad talks about reading an image, and lots of theorists before and after have also talked about reading. So perhaps I need to say how we may read future images from future technologies, but also how the consumers or the prosumers or somewhere between the two also construct images for reading or read images themselves to then recreate. There's perhaps a little area we can delve into there in translation as well. A large part of social media platforms, specifically TikTok, and I understand this is where the problem came from because I do feel like I talk about TikTok more than other platforms now. The generation of memes, essentially, how an audience reads one image or one little text, and then they recreate exactly the same text but with their own stamp, whether that just be a literal copying of the thing they viewed, or if they recreate it with a twist and have a joke on the end of it or something, or if they just use the audio from it in a different fashion with a different visual attached to it. And then there's argument we can get into in how that changes meaning. Is that the same product? Is it the same text? Does it actually have different meaning? Then we get back into McLuhan and we talk about things like, well, is that just a transmitted message, or is there space for us to interpret the message? It's rich ground for analysis. It's difficult to see what the output is, though. It's difficult to see how I present this to someone and say, I will do this amount of work for you, and ultimately, here's what the world will get from that. So this is the hard part, and it's daunting. It's daunting because there's a lot of money and time attached to this now. If it's self-funded, we're at least 5 years, probably more, and thousands of pounds are attached to this now as well. Again, if it's self-funded, how do I make it worth that amount of time and money? And then also, this isn't just a vanity project. This isn't just me wanting to have a PhD and to be doctor. This is about, it's about career prospects, but it's also about having the opportunity to really delve into a subject and becoming an expert on it, or the expert on it. And there's the rub, really, is what will I be the expert on specifically? I can feel it's around old media versus new media and the definitions of those terms, especially within the social media age. And it's around language in media. But that's pretty vague. And clearly I'm not the expert on those areas because they are well-covered areas. So what's my niche? What do we get out of this? So the work I'm doing right now to try and find these answers, to find out what I'm going to be doing, is I'm actually reading a lot of PhD theses that people have written recently from a great website, actually, and I'll put the link in the description. It just has a catalogue of published PhD papers, and it's really useful to see how other people are researching topics within media and cross-media convergence. And reading an article at the minute, and the start of the article made a debate between the word convergence and interaction, perhaps, which is also another useful term I'm going to have to think about. But reading a lot of other research from other people on similar subjects is a great way to see how you do this as a desk-based project. Because to me, up until recently, PhD in my mind was always quite practical. I don't feel super comfortable with just desk-based research because that's not my strength in life. But I can make it my strength, and I'm going to have to find a way to do that. So reading these other PhD papers is my first avenue into doing that, I suppose. So that's enough babbling, and I'm sure this is going to just only have one view in it in the next 7 months. But it's useful for me to do this, and I still would like to continue engaging with the creation of content, even if I'm not doing anything flashy with it or doing anything even that fits within the genre that it has become. I'm quite aware that this is a very old school use of YouTube, just a person talking to a camera. It was exciting in the early 2000s, 2004 onwards, I guess. I don't know how exciting it is now in the face of such on-demand entertainment that we have everywhere. And yeah, I'm not exactly competing with someone like William Osman, am I? Anyway, enough of that babble. Time to read some more articles. Sure, I'll get back to this quite soon. Cheers.